the pressure that foreign governments can exert on a global company is really problematic, and that can lead to the suppression of speech here in the United States. Where are we moving on net? And I think folks having greater access to knowledge and the ability to share knowledge and speak freely on net is going to drive society towards a better future, a more open future, than if we were to try and restrict those things only or hoard them ourselves,
Right.
right? Problem is that regardless of whether you're printing pamphlets or you're posting on social media, governments trying to control speech is a problem all this time.
Well, if you wouldn't mind, just start off by kind of telling me what you got going on. I know you're part of NetChoice. I know you're into technology and that kind of stuff. But would you mind just kind of give our listeners a little bit of background about who you are, what you have going on, and then we'll kind of spur into our conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Patrick Hedger. I'm director of policy at NetChoice, and I've spent almost my entire career in free market and civil liberties advocacy. And I kept finding myself on the same side as NetChoice on several different issues. And last fall, I decided to join the organization because I think they're really on the frontier and at the front lines of where the important battles are happening in terms of liberty, innovation, the things that are going to be really important in the 21st century. Protecting free speech, but also protecting free enterprise online. And also, technology policy is really a great policy place to be because so many other policy areas, whether we're talking energy policy, labor policy, things like that, healthcare, a lot of the fight is trying to get bad regulations off the books, and that's extremely hard to do. Um, we're in a nice position in technology policy where we can prevent bad things from ever happening, and that's a great place to be.
So give me more background when you say technology policy. Are you talking federal, state? Are you talking about like the making rules on how we relegate AI, or are you talking about Congress? Like, give me a little bit more about that space that you're working in.
Yeah, it's all of the above, because right now the technology companies and tech policy broadly, AI especially, has kind of created this. I almost call it like the first day of prison effect, right? They always say when you get to prison, you got to beat up the biggest guy on the yard to assert dominance,
Mm.
and that's what politicians are doing right now. It's the biggest news stories are all about AI. The biggest companies are all in technology, and so you see this urge to kind of try and get their hands around that. And so you see that at the federal level, you see it at the state level, you also see it at the international level. One of the biggest things that we deal with is European Union regulations and the EU bleeding into the rest of the global internet. I mean, if you've ever gotten online and seen a cookie pop up, that's because of the European Union. So international regulations can affect you here domestically as well. And what we're really trying to do is make sure at the both the state and federal level that we don't make some of the same mistakes that we've seen globally that have harmed innovation in places like the European Union. I think we're extremely fortunate to have Silicon Valley here in the United States, but there are policy decisions that will make that not so.
Such as, like, what is there things going on right now that you're saying Silicon Valley might not stay in the U.S.? Is that kind of what you just hinted at?
Well, it's essentially it's a fire that you could put out, right?
Mm,
You could smother innovation here in the U.S.
right.
with the wrong type of regulatory regime. I think what we saw from JD Vance when he went over to the EU, went to the summit, the AI summit there, and explained, "Hey, look, we're not going to go down this path because the European Union is very proud that they have regulated technologies, but they are not regulating their own companies essentially."
Mm,
Because if you think about the largest technology companies, the most influential technology companies, they're either based here in the United States or they have a counterpart in China. But despite the fact that the European Union has double the population of the United States and at the turn of the century was roughly the same size economically, and can you name a prominent European technology firm? It's kind of hard to do.
right.
Who's their Microsoft? Who's their Apple? There's no real equivalent, and that's because of policy decisions. They rushed to get an AI Act out the door. You've got the Digital Markets Act, the Digital Services Act, the General Data Protection
And are
Act.
all these control? Is it control related, or like why regulate? Why do we need so much regulation in the technology space? Do they argue because it's to protect citizens? To like, what's the reason for all this quick act? Like we just talked about in the EU, there's really quick to regulate these things. Why do we need so much regulation on technology?
Yeah, I mean, to borrow a term from the great Thomas Sowell, there's essentially a conflict of visions. And in
Mm,
the United States, we have largely had what is known as permissionless innovation, right? You can launch Uber or you can launch this company, Airbnb, and you can disrupt an industry.
mm,
And you don't have to go get government permission generally to do that.
right.
Versus in the European Union, they're very risk averse.
Mm,
And so you see this rush to try and regulate every aspect of a technology before it even gets out of the cradle. I mean, imagine trying to put in place everything we know about what we need to regulate on an automobile after
mhm.
the first Model T rolls off the assembly line. That doesn't make a whole
Yeah.
lot of sense. And so that is sort of the two different approaches that we see, and we're seeing that happen. Unfortunately, in the United States, there's been a rush at the state level, in particular, to try and pass various AI regulations related to trying to prevent what is known as algorithmic discrimination, is what we are seeing. And there's a lot of bills that are popping up here and there that are really concerning, very well intended bills, but the onerous reporting requirements trying to prevent problems that we don't even know would potentially exist from happening is
Mm,
going to stop companies from even trying to put resources towards advancing technologies in that space.
mm. I get the fear behind AI, right? Like there's it's something we don't quite understand, and you watch the movies of AI, robots becoming sentient and taking over the planets. And so I know there's a lot of concern about AI particularly. But when you're talking about when we use the word technology, what else are you talking about them trying to regulate? What other spaces, like technology is a very broad word. So I guess are there other sectors of technologies? AI, the main it's probably the hot button focus right now. But like, what other things go into this conversation that the average person would be able to kind of gather?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think probably the biggest space would be the online media space, whether we're
Mm,
talking social media, podcasts, you name it. There is a different speech culture that we see in the European Union versus the United States. And even, unfortunately, you see in the United States, both sides want to control what is said online for different reasons. And thankfully, we have that conflict because it's prevented a lot of government censorship in the United States because of that. But in the European Union, there's been a lot, and in EU member states, there's a lot of agreement about trying to prevent what they define to be extreme speech or harmful
mm,
speech. And you end up suppressing a lot of otherwise benign and lawful speech as well. So there's that aspect of it that is really problematic. And as we've seen, these technology companies that were born as social media companies are doing some of the most important innovation that we're seeing in the quantum computing space, in the AI space. So it's really important that you never know what a technology company that launches doing X, Y,
mm,
or Z may be doing A, B, or C that we could never predict down the road. And so overly regulating a company that's mainly engaged in speech,
yeah.
it could harm AI innovation, space innovation, right? Who would have
Mm,
thought a bookseller in the 90s would be launching satellites to provide internet today?
right.
That's Amazon.
Right. Do did side note, did you watch the Joe Rogan and like conversation that he had with oh, I'm blanking on the Facebook guy. I'm blanking.
Mark Zuckerberg?
Yeah, thank you. I was like, well, it's not Elon because that's Twitter. Yeah, so with Zuckerberg. So did you watch that at all? That conversation?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of it, yes.
Yeah, so I got probably about three-fourths through. So this is my question when it comes to the regulation. And then we'll jump in to other stuff. But this is one thing I don't quite understand. So generally speaking, for me, I think small government's better, especially federal. Give states rights. That's like what I would view in my political. And generally, regulation's a bad thing. Generally speaking, like stop regulating things, let the free market take care of its things. With technology, it gets a little hairy because I can understand the dangers of like, let's say like I put my personal information on this social media site. What rules are there to protect my personal information? So that makes a little more sense that there's that regulation there. But when Zuck was talking to Rogan, because for a long time, people on the conservative side, like Facebook was the enemy for us. Like they were the free speech deniers, and you would get your banned account if you said anything remotely conservative for a long time. And then he goes up and whether he's doing PR control, whether he understands the Trump regime is coming in, so he's trying to save face, whatever that is, he was saying how it was the American government and the EU, everyone putting insane amount of pressure on them to keep certain misinformation that they would label misinformation off or hate speech off. Um, I guess because you're in the space more, do you buy it? Do you think that Zuckerberg it was purely pressured, or do you think that he's just walking back right now just to try to save a little space? I don't know if you're allowed to give your opinion on that, but
No, certainly. I mean, we have evidence, right? I think the Twitter files provided a great look at what the government had been doing at least at the U.S. federal level.
mm,
But you think about the different types of things that have been proposed over the years, whether it is antitrust regulation or whether it is various regulations to try and control the content moderation policies of these companies. They're getting enormous pressure from all sides, whether it is the European government or whether it is the U.S. government or state governments. And the really difficult thing in the United States is that they're getting different pressures from state to state, essentially, right? You
mm,
could have a Democratic trifecta state that wants to see one thing and a Republican trifecta state that wants to see another online. There are very subjective definitions of what is and what is not harmful content, right? We have very limited what is explicitly illegal content. We know
sure,
what those are. There's very bright lines in U.S. law on those things.
right.
But beyond that, right? We don't like the definitions of what is and what is not harmful content
Mm,
can vary based on your political stance. So that's a really difficult tightrope to walk. And the problem with giving government so much power is they can be upset with what you do over here on this side of your business, excuse me, in the content side of your business. And the way they get you, the way they can pressure you to do something different there is by turning the screws over here on something else that you're doing.
mm,
And so that is why I think it's really important to kind of look at how the government's able to exert pressure and prevent that, right? And then we can have conversations about what's going on at companies once we are able to eliminate that side of it. I think there's what the Trump administration put in place, the executive order. Um, Going after this, what we call job owning, right? Pressuring companies to take down speech. Um, that should be codified, right? That's something that could change as soon as the Trump administration is no longer in power. I know
right.
Senator Paul has a bill that would do that. So getting some sort of permanence there would be great, and that way we can get more to the root of the problem if there persists to be one.
Do you see that happening? Because regardless of the aisle that you're on, the government likes power. Generally speaking, our governments they want more and they want more and they want more. Do you see through the Trump administration them being able to pass a bill that is more long term that protects social media companies, technology companies from more government regulation? Do you see? Do you think that's an actual thing that might happen, or will this just be every 4 years? We're just going to keep walking this tightrope back and forth.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would love to be more optimistic. I hope that that happens. I think that's something that we should continue to fight
Mm,
for and not be deterred. But you're very right that the government does want more power. It always does, and I think it's really important for folks to understand what the shoe looks like on the other foot. I think the Trump administration's got a lot of experience with that, right?
mm,
They have experience with government being weaponized, and it's important
excuse
not
me.
to set precedents or load a bazooka that essentially will be handed to your enemy in four
Right.
to 8 years. So I think it's something we have to continue to push for, but it's also why we need to be careful about new frontier regulations on technologies like AI, right?
Mm,
Because you may be regulating AI to prevent algorithmic discrimination, like I talked about earlier, but that regulation can then be turned around to exert pressure on companies to do things like manipulating the content that AI produces to
mm.
advance a specific political agenda. So it's about reducing those pressure points and those leverage points that politicians can abuse on frontier technologies.
Gotcha. What I guess do you see? So when I look at the EU, for example, people are now getting arrested for what they're posting online, and it's becoming like you do hate speech, and all of a sudden you're in jail there. What's the slippery slope that would get America to that point? Like, what would it take? How close are we to that right now? And if we don't act quickly, is that something that Americans should be keeping their eyes on?
Yeah, I don't think we're close to Americans being arrested for that. I mean, thankfully, the First Amendment and the courts in the United States are still very defensive of the First Amendment.
Mm,
That said, I think the pressure that foreign governments can exert on a global company is really problematic, and that can lead to the suppression of speech here in the United States. You're not
mm,
gonna get arrested for what you're saying, but the company may be more inclined to not let you post that or take it down after you've posted that because of the big pressure that they're facing from the European Union. I mean, some of the fines that we've seen associated with EU laws would amount to 10% of global revenue for companies.
wow.
Global revenue. I mean, like, that would bankrupt a company overnight because you have violated a law in the EU that's
Mm,
and something that's whether it's competition policy or speech regulation that's not even illegal here in the United States. And that's why I think the Trump administration is very right to go to the EU and say, you can't just be taxing our companies like
mm,
this. You can't be doing this because that is ultimately coming out of the pockets of American citizens. And it's also harming the access to the free and open internet that American citizens have. Again, I go back to if you're annoyed every time you go to a different website and you have to click through all of those cookie pop-ups
yeah.
because of a foreign regulation. And so the
Mm.
idea that it could never happen here, yeah, you're probably not going to go to jail for what you've said, but you may have your access to valuable services reduced.
What would it take for like a company like Facebook to just pull their services from countries that are penalizing them so much with these fees?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, what we've already seen is that a lot of companies, particularly in the AI space, have not launched their products in the European Union.
Mm,
So we're not at the stage yet of completely pulling out of those markets, but we are at the stage where they're saying, "Look, this cool new thing that Americans have access to, we're not sure that's in compliance with this vague law that you passed.
mm.
We're going to delay the launch there, or you may never get it to begin at all."
Yeah, because there's already countries like I mean, like China doesn't. Correct me if I'm wrong, but China doesn't have Facebook, right? Or is there access to Facebook in China? I'm not sure on that. I don't know if
Yeah,
you
most Western platforms are banned in China. Yeah,
right.
that's
And it seems like more countries are like in the EU who are going to that China model of not letting their citizens have anything of type of free will. And so you'd think, naturally speaking, if Facebook does pull things from the EU, that would force lawmakers to change. I mean, they have to at that point make a decision, right?
yeah,
Like,
unfortunately, it almost seems like that would be their goal. The
mm,
European, they're doing whatever possible to try and suppress this technology. There a lot of European Union, officials seem perfectly happy with the fact that folks would not have access to free and open
mm,
speech and resources that are controlled by Americans, and that's really unfortunate. I mean, I hate to see the internet starting to get walled off, especially we expect this kind of behavior from the Chinese, we expect it from the Russians. We shouldn't be expecting it from Western Europe, but
right.
that's precisely what we're seeing.
That's a good point. I mean, it's kind of like almost like America is. Would you say America is like the last big country power that's really the last free speech country left that on a global scale wants this? Because it seems like a lot of our allies in the past that would have you would think aligned in ideology, they're just not anymore.
Yeah, I think that's why the battle is so existential here. I
Mm,
mean, I don't know of anywhere in the world where free speech is protected to the extent that it is in the United States.
mm,
And we a lot of folks really take it for granted. But unfortunately, what we're also seeing is that there are attempts to try and erode those protections because you don't like what a big company is doing. You don't like their content moderation policies. I get it. Look, if that's being caused by the government, we got to address that. But simply because a big company is owned by somebody that you disagree with politically,
sure.
if you work to try and erode their rights, you're eroding your own rights at the
Correct.
same time. So we got to be careful there because again, yeah, I don't know where we go in the world where you can have both free innovation and free speech online. Who is really driving that?
Right.
Because again, the if you look at market cap, right, and user bases, the top companies are all either here in the United States or they are Chinese-based firms,
Sure.
and that is that's a very clear choice what the future path is for the internet.
And you just mentioned a really interesting point where I think conservatives sometimes can well, I think the Twitter files muddied the waters on what you're supposed to think. Because like YouTube, for example, the reason why Rumble exists is because YouTube demonetized people's videos and took them down. So then you're like, well, but YouTube has every right. It's owned by Google. They're a company. They can make those rules. But the question is, did they make those rules or did the government make it for them? And I think that's when the Twitter files came out, it proved what a lot of people were thinking. The CIA and the FBI were literally like forcing Twitter to do different things, take down certain posts, boost certain posts, whatever. And then I think that's what makes the most people concerned with like YouTube, for example. Like YouTube is where I have my biggest platform. And I'm always weary of, depending on what I say, how much, if we're going to talk about, the V word, right? The vaccine word, right? Oh, all of a sudden this video is going to be throttled. I already know it's going to be throttled. But is that a YouTube thing or is that a government thing? And like, in your opinion, in these big companies, how much of their models are just, this is what the company believes they're doing best, and how much do you think it's government pressure?
I mean, it's very hard to say, and I think it varies company to company, but there's no doubt that there's been a tremendous amount of government pressure. And I think back to a bill that was introduced by Senator Amy Klobuchar, which would have basically conditioned, the really important statute for technology companies, which is Section 230, would have conditioned Section 230 protections on the companies having to listen to what the HHS secretary says in terms of what is and what is not health misinformation. And so that is not just behind the scenes pressure, but that is a overt pressure in
Sure.
terms of content moderation policies. Like, we can put your business model at risk unless you listen to what the Secretary of the Health and Human Services said. That is as close to a First Amendment problem as you really get. And so I think that has to be addressed, right?
Mm,
That is what the companies are largely responding to. And I also look at, when you're talking about trying to put in place regulations to, whether it is get back at companies because you don't like decisions that they've made or you're concerned about some of the business models that they have. I think about the YouTube Rumble dynamic, right?
sure.
YouTube, Google has a lot of the resources to be able to comply with even the most onerous regulations you can think of. They
Right.
wouldn't love it, but they have those resources. A Rumble doesn't. And so I'm always thinking about, who is that company that is still in a garage somewhere, that doesn't have the lawyers, doesn't have the accountants, and is not going to be able to comply with the regulatory moats that get put up around, well, while trying to control a major tech companies, may actually insulate them from any kind of competition.
Do you think the reason why Rumble has largely been, at least to my knowledge, untouched by the same push as maybe Facebook, Twitter, or Google by the government, that's just a user base thing? Like, the government's just kind of watching on how many users are accessing this, accessing this platform. And the moment it gets to the point where they feel like too many Americans are on this platform, they're going to come down hard on it. Like, if Rumble grows too much, do you think that's when the government will care and start treating it like YouTube?
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially a radar problem, right?
Right.
The larger you get, the bigger you show up on radar, and so, that's there's certainly an element of that there.
Mm,
But I think there's also, we've been very fortunate that, we've been able to beat back a lot of the worst potential regulatory proposals out there that would, while all of them are very well intended, would have the unintended consequences, again, of stifling innovation and stifling competition. I
mm.
mean, a world without Section 230 is a very difficult world for Rumble as much as it is for YouTube.
Are you familiar with the whole Parler situation that happened? Do you remember the social media app called Parler? It was, at one point, I think in 2018 or 2019, the fourth fastest growing social media app, at one point. And then it got blamed for J6 and it was taken off of AWS and taken off of everything. So they're back now. I don't know if you know this. They're back now, and I'm friends with a couple of them, friends with the chairman and some other people, and they're really great people. But I think the thing that I'd love to get your opinion on with that whole situation is, it was very easy and quick for a social media platform that had over 23 million users at one point. I mean, more than that, but I think still there's like currently 23 million people that still have Parler downloaded on their phone, like actively, right? So it was not a small social media platform. It was the original free speech platform. Um, that's what they branded as. So, but it was kind of easy for it to just disappear. Like, it just seemed overnight the government said, nope, you shouldn't exist anymore. AWS said, okay, we'll pull our support, and it was off the App Store. It's a little scary how quickly a social media app that big can just go away. Should there be protections for companies that if the government doesn't like something they did to just be able to just cease their existence with a snap of the fingers?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a difficult one, right? It's not one with an easy answer. There's no silver bullet here within the context of American law. But here are some things that I would suggest. First and foremost, we need to make sure that we have a competitive dynamic at all levels of the internet stack, right? Whether that is at your ISP level, whether that is at the website level, or at the data center level, right? Where who is storing your data, who is
Mm,
powering your website, the cloud services that protect uh, websites and allow them to function, right? And the way you best ensure that is by, again, not creating a regulatory structure that stifles the ability for companies to get off the ground at all levels of the stack. And there's a lot that we can still do,
mm,
whether it's at the ISP level, whether it's at the cloud computing level, and whether it's at the edge level, to ensure that companies are getting access to capital, and are getting access to the services they need to stay online. I mean, a great place I would point folks to is if you look at initial public offerings, IPOs,
mhm.
way down in terms of when companies are launching. They're launching later and at larger sizes, which suggests it's becoming a lot harder to get public investment
Sure.
because of SEC regulations. So there's like one little part of the solution there to allow companies to gain the resources they need to continue to function. And I worry that a lot of the solutions that I've seen proposed in response to this situation would actually make it easier in the long run for government to exert pressure and
Mm,
take down companies or services that they don't like in the future. Because again, if you create this power and you say you're using it for good, you don't know who's going to be using it down the road. And that is
right.
something I want folks to be really, really cautious about. So if you're upset about what happened there, and you say, "Well, we're gonna use antitrust law to break up the companies that did that," okay, well, that can be turned around just as quickly to break up companies
That are
that don't.
good. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so
Are you familiar with blockchain at all, the blockchain technology? So that's what Parler did. So that was their solution. I'm not if you know all this, my listeners might. So I'll give you a little bit of what's going on there. And it's just a unique thing that I'd love to get because you're in this world of tech. So I'd love to get your thoughts on this. So when they got banned, the new owners bought it back in September or earlier last year, and then they built a blockchain called Optio. Actually, I'm friends with Brian, who literally is the guy that built Optio. So it's a decentralized platform, just like an AWS that they built. And the theory is that now it like they are not on AWS anymore. Like they have their own blockchain that powers their app that is now decentralized, but by government touch. Do you see thoughts on that? B, do you see more and more companies going down this path of using the cryptocurrency technology to try to protect themselves from government regulation?
I I would say that I increasingly see companies wanting to get a lot of these decisions out of their hands because they're sick of like the pressure that they're getting from either side, and that
Mm,
often kind of conflicts with each other. And so that's what you've seen with the approach that Meta is taking now, where they're doing the community notes approach
yeah,
to content moderation. I think you see a lot of companies again, yeah, wanting to empower users because again, a lot of the things that these companies are dealing with in the content space are fundamentally subjective, right? Something that is abhorrent and violent to one person may not be to another,
sure,
right?
sure.
And or something that's distasteful, you name it, right? These we're talking about fundamental debates that are again based in subjective values, and that's a really difficult thing for companies to navigate. So to the extent that they can decentralize systems and empower users, yeah, even the largest companies are kind of going down that route. And we've seen a new push by several companies in the online safety space as well
Mm,
to re-empower users, right? You determine what the filters are, right? And
right.
here's where our tools are, right? Instead of us turning them on, you turn them on, and here's how you do it. Yeah, whether it's through blockchain technology or whether it's through things like community notes, the ability to empower users and kind of get that decision making out of the individual company's hands, I think is something that's going to be really important going forward.
Do you think it's just as simple as just a permission slide when you log into an app, basically saying like this app's kind of like the wild wild west? When you go to a trampoline park and you have to sign a waiver before you jump on the trampoline, saying like if you get hurt, it was your choice and you chose to be here. we are not liable for anything that you did, right? That hurt yourself. Do you think that that's the legal play for social media where they can say, hey, look, it is on the user what they see or don't see and what they allow, what they don't allow. It is not our fault if they see something that they think is hate speech or they see something that they think is misinformation. Like that's on them. Is that kind of the play moving forward to try to take liability, or would the government just not let that slide? Because they'd still be blaming the platform for housing those things.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think that pressure is ever going to stop from government, and we still see it today, right? There are still government officials that get upset about what you see in cable, right? And
Sure.
and I think it's important that we
Right.
recognize that we are just dealing with a new type of technology and a new moral panic that has existed with every type of new media that
Mm.
has ever been launched, right? We had this debate in the 90s about video games. We've had it about explicit music and movies, right? And we've increasingly seen companies come together and produce voluntary rating systems, which I think is really important, right? We want this to be happening outside of government, right? We want families, we want users and companies to be able to work together to kind of empower each other to create a safer space, right? We saw that with the movie rating system, right?
Sure.
When you go to a theater and you can't get into the R-rated movie because you're under 17, that's a voluntary private system that is doing that. Or the
Mhm.
ESRB system with video games, that is a privately
Huh.
managed rating system, right? The government is not saying that that game is mature. It's the video game companies and trade association that says, hey, that we're going to manage this rating system. So I think empowering companies to kind of be able to come together and work on those things would be great. But a lot of them are afraid to do it right now because you could be seen as colluding under antitrust law. So,
Mm.
so I think sometimes in certain cases the government pressure is harmful towards these ends. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I'd argue that government pressure in anything is generally not a good thing. Because, like you said, even if let's just say we had someone that we like in power, so to speak, and we like the pressure they're doing, and they allow that to happen, the moment that power flips and they have that power now, it's just going to be a ping pong match moving forward of just 4 years of this, 4 years of that, 4 years of this, right? And that's what we want to avoid.
I mean, we saw this. I think if you look at regulation at the internet service provider level, there was a ping pong back and forth about the issue of net neutrality, and say whatever you want about that issue, whatever side of that issue you're on, that ping pong back and forth a
Mm,
lot, and that caused companies to say, "Well, we're unsure about if we're going to invest or not because we're not really sure what kind of regulatory structure
mm,
we're going to operate under." And so you don't want to see that spread to other industries as well where you're not getting new product launches because you don't have an understanding of what am I going to be dealing with 4 years from now, right? Companies don't look on 4 year horizons. They're looking on 10, 20, 30 year horizons.
sure. Um, which is a very interesting. I want this is just a side thing. The show is very Joe Rogan-y, where I'm not a great interviewer, just kind of have like cool conversations. Speaking of having long-term outlooks, I watched this 30-minute documentary last night on Saudi Arabia. Have you heard about the line that they're building? Like it's called the Line, and it's
Yeah.
called like it's just gonna be this massive just city, like through the desert. And then they're also apparently building like a resort thing, and they're building something where you can ski and like just doing all these things, right? Because Saudi Arabia sees the writing on the wall of companies trying to get away from oil, and all they have is oil. And so they're trying to come up with something that will, you know, give it's the next thing, this their next cash cow, and they're thinking tourism is going to be that or whatever. I don't know. Have you heard of that at all? Because it's kind of wild.
I have heard of the line. I'll credit them for their ambition. We'll see. We'll see if it ever comes to reality.
It's just one of those things, and if I offend any of my Saudi listeners, if I have any of those, I apologize. But generally speaking, Saudi Arabia is not what you'd consider as a vacation area. Like they have not been very kind historically to Westerners visiting, and now they're trying to just do a 180, where they're actually like, "We're Dubai, we're cool. Come in, have fun with us. It'll be great." And I'm just like, if it works, cool. First of all, if it works, yeah, that would be sick. I have so many questions on how you're going to get power out there and through all that. Forget that. But it is a unique thing of basically you have a country that's like our gold, so to speak, which is oil. 30, 40, 50 years ago might not being as needed as it is now. And we have a big problem because that's all we really have. And so they think that tourism is their answer, which is a unique. I think Dubai is probably what they saw what happened in Dubai, and they're like, we can do that here and make it better. That's probably in my mind. I don't know if we're just randomly talking now, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. It's
Yeah,
interesting.
I would say it's important for governments to understand that markets are very fluid and that the future is pretty hard to predict and that you shouldn't rest on your laurels, right?
Yeah.
I think I worry about that in our own government where they assume like, well, we'll always have these trillion-dollar companies that are,
Hmm.
producing these incredible services that are doing quantum computing and AI and things like that. That's not necessarily the case.
Right.
You never know what the next disruptive technology will be. I mean, there could be a kid in his basement or his parents' garage right now that has already stumbled upon some sort of discovery that's going to upend, one of the larger companies overnight.
Yeah.
You just don't know. So I think it's always good for governments to have sort of an open-ended and vision of the future. I don't know about sort of command and control and central planning of exactly where people are going to live and in what shape they're going to live. Like,
Right.
we're all
Same
going to
here.
live in a big long line in the desert. Maybe that's a little bit too much central planning. Um, but
Literally central planning. Right.
yes, yeah. So, but being future minded and saying, hey, we want to build cool stuff. All the power to you.
Yeah. The one thing I will tell you this, and we'll go on to the next point, but the props to the Saudi government because they actually paid the people that they were removing from the desert. So there were like towns and stuff that they actually paid them to say, hey, we're going to help you start a new life somewhere. We're going to give you money, but we're literally taking your house, whatever. Right. So they at least paid them. But then if they said no, then they killed them. And so it was one of those things where there's this there's a guy that went to social media and he was just like, I'm not moving. They're trying to take my home. I'm not taking their bribes. And then he was dead like the next day. And so it's just this unique, because it is still like you have a king of Saudi Arabia. Like it's not a democracy. Like
No.
and that's the thing that's, to me, it's not even the technology. Can they pull it off? That's not to me the issue. The issue to me is, are Westerners going to ever feel comfortable going to a place that's kind of like communist China? Like that has the charade of beauty, but behind the charade is just a dictator. And like if Putin created the coolest thing ever and said, Americans, you're welcome, you're gonna be like, you know what I mean? Like that. I think that's gonna be their biggest hurdle is convincing Westerners that they would feel welcome and safe there.
Yeah, I mean, and this point kind of reminds me of what I'm really concerned about if I look at the global picture and where we are in terms of what the future of technology and the internet looks like.
Mm,
The next billion people that come online and are coming online right now, sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia,
mm,
they're getting wealthier and they're getting access to the internet. They're getting smartphones. It's great, right? And these are things like Starlink that are allowing
sure.
them access to the global internet. And they're accessing services like microfinance to kind of lift themselves up, which is fantastic. But the question is, what is the future? What are those billion people going to be using? What services are they going to be
Mm,
using? Are they going to be coming online on an iPhone or on a Huawei phone, right?
right.
And I think that's a really important question that we ought to be asking before we start, taking for granted the companies and services that we have here.
Mm,
Yes, you may have your disagreements with them, but I would venture to guess you have a much bigger disagreement with Xi Jinping. And
right.
so the question is, how do we continue to promote American innovation and
Yeah.
in a global internet built on the classically liberal values that undergird American society versus ceding that ground to potentially nefarious actors?
That's a really good debate, and or like the thing to debate and question and figure out. Because like we have free speech laws here in America that we have the First Amendment to protect that. But someone in Saudi Arabia or someone in another country does it. And if we give these people through Starlink a voice for them to criticize their leaders and the ability, and they don't necessarily themselves even know the repercussions of what they're doing until it's too like that's an interesting thing where if you give people the access, like this for example, this guy in Saudi Arabia that literally made a reel, like this made a video and then had a shootout with the police, like that's something that if he didn't have a phone, maybe things would be different. I don't know. But the fact the government saw his video, they said, take him out. And I wonder if that would be more widespread if, like, you look at some of the governments like China and like that are like, we know that they're corrupt and they're oppressing the people. Okay. If you gave everyone free access to the internet to say whatever they wanted to say, how many of them would put themselves into a box before they realized it was too late?
Yeah, it's a difficult trade-off, right? And I would not wanna be on the overly cautious side of that question because if you
Mm,
look throughout history, right, I wouldn't say the printing press has led to more oppression. The
right.
printing press was very important in challenging, you know, centralized institutions and abuses of power. And every new type of speech technology has certainly drawbacks, right? There are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. I borrow a
Mm.
lot from Thomas Sowell, but I think
Yeah,
he's
he's
a
a
good.
great, yes. I mean, that's a good person to borrow from.
But
Yeah.
so many things that apply to wherever you're looking throughout the economy or society, right? There
Mm,
are no solutions, there are only trade-offs, right? And so where are we moving on net? And I think folks having greater access to knowledge and ability to share knowledge and speak freely is on net is going to drive society towards a better future, a more open future than if we were to try and restrict those things and only or hoard them ourselves,
right.
right? I think that's not the preferred solution here. And ultimately, the problem is that regardless of whether you're printing pamphlets or
Mm,
you're posting on social media, governments trying to control speech is a
correct.
problem as old as time.
And it's just a lot of times just giving a voice to the voiceless at minimum of what this could be. Starlink's incredible, but that reminded me of the Stargate thing that Trump has done. It was like 500 billion or something like that into technology. Would you mind giving us a taste of that program that Trump has going right now?
Yeah, what a really exciting announcement, especially as a limited government guy. I was excited to hear that it was not my money, right? It's
Hmm.
private capital. It's 500 billion in private capital that is going to be invested in the United States to produce the energy and data infrastructure necessary for an AI revolution. And that is really, really important. And it happened. The fact that the Trump administration, President Trump himself, took time within the first, I think it was within the first 24 hours of taking office, not exactly like a free and open schedule for him,
Right.
to be a part of that announcement is a great signal to the tech industry that, hey, we're open for business again.
Hmm.
Because what we saw under the Biden administration was a willingness to cooperate with the European Union. I hate to keep going back to them, but they're the best example of like the most aggressive regulators in the world. The Biden administration was cooperating with them in terms of trying to institute regulations on frontier technologies like AI, and that keeps investment on the sideline
Hmm.
because investment, the antidote to investment, if you will, is uncertainty. And so the regulatory uncertainty that was created by the Biden administration, we're going to regulate you here, we're going to break you up there, we're going to control what you can and cannot have on your website here. I mean, I think back to what Mark Andreessen said on a recent podcast, famous investor in Silicon
Yeah.
Valley,
Yeah. Yeah.
internet pioneer, that the Biden administration effectively told him, look, we're only going to have two or three AI companies and we're going to be controlling them. We're going to regulate them. And that's it.
That's not going to end poorly.
Right. That's not going to get $500 billion of private investment off
Right.
the sidelines to build infrastructure because people are going to be too busy worried about, am I going to get regulated? I need to hire lawyers. I need to hire lobbyists. So,
Hmm.
really, really encouraging sign that the Trump administration is at least in certain areas going to say, we're going to let you invest and create. And then we can address regulatory issues as needed instead of trying to predict the future and regulate the entire space in one foul swoop.
Are And I think in theory, a free market sounds amazing, but I still think a lot of people are freaked the crap out from AI. Like it just terrifies them. And I think you could have potentially the most like conservative, small government person in the world that then when you talk about AI, they're like, we need to have, that's the one thing that they're actually maybe like, we need more regulation in. What's your gut feeling on this whole AI thing? Are you concerned about the potential, because even Elon at the AI summit was like, this thing has the potential to destroy civilizations. Like, this is not a joking match. Like, and you hear that and you're like, oh, well, but then and then you hear him that he's like make grok, and he's also doing things with open AI and everything. So like, what's your gut feeling? Do you feel that this is something that could turn to be a big problem for humanity, or is this just another tool that is just going to be fine?
Yeah, so I would encourage folks to start using it, because that is the way that you're gonna understand what exactly it is, and I've begun using it even in my own job. It's incredible how much more productive it's making me. It's not replacing me, it's enhancing what I can do in 24 or 8 hours and more,
No,
right?
that's the
That
argument. Right now, it's only in hit, but is the concern is that 10 years down the line, it's going to get so good
Mhm.
that you're not needed anymore.
Yeah, that's again, I don't wanna get into the business of predicting the future, because I've been telling politicians that you should be out of the business of predicting the future.
Right, right, right.
But if you look back,
This is
right?
a safe space. This is a safe space.
So instead of trying to predict the future, let's look to the past a little bit.
Mm,
There's a great website I would encourage everybody to go to. It's called the Pessimist Archive, right? Google it, the Pessimist Archive. It's fantastic because there are examples as old as time that they have compiled of people being afraid of people are reading too many novels. It's just going to destroy their brain and make them lazy. And then there's cartoons about people tangled up in electrical lines. We got to stop the spread of electricity. It's going to destroy our society. And so these fears have always existed with frontier
mm,
technologies. And I think that every technology is going to have a drawback. But if we look at another really important but powerful technology that had I don't think AI, I'm not one that believes that AI is going to turn into Skynet, but look at a technology that did very much so have the potential to destroy civilization,
mhm,
nuclear energy and nuclear weapons. We regulated that so much out of fear that we're not getting the benefit from it either, and
mm,
that is a huge, huge issue. So I think the more realistic chance of hurting ourselves is by smothering a technology before really understanding what we can benefit from that technology.
mm,
And right now, we see societies all around the world that are regulating themselves, including including the United States, into energy scarcity. And I
mm,
encourage folks to understand that li- there are no energy poor rich nations, right? You have to have an abundant energy supply, and we've really harmed our ability since the middle of the last century to have that technology and the benefits of it. I think it's important to look and not say there's never any regulation that is necessary, but making sure that regulation comes with certainty and is addressed in an incremental way and narrowly targets specific outcomes instead of trying to regulate the technology as a whole, right? Because
mm.
any technology can be misused, right?
Sure.
I can buy a hammer from Home Depot and go smack someone in the head with it. That doesn't mean you ban the hammer,
Right.
right? That's already a crime.
And that's an interesting thing that you just said, even about like the nuclear, or like the fear of climate change and the fear of, because I'm not, listen, I am one that leans to, uh I think the world is only going to be deteriorating until God comes back. Okay, so that's my biblical worldview. So that's what I think. At some, so sure, is the world maybe changing for the negative? Probably over time. Sure, we're gonna run out. Do I think that's the biggest crisis to where we shouldn't drill for oil here in the states? No, that's stupid. Um, but you're right. Like for fear of climate change, we've stopped the certain research when it comes to oil, and then for fear of nuclear, like Chernobyl, for turning America into Chernobyl, for example, we don't even really do we even dabble in nuclear anymore? Is that even a thing that they're researching as an option for us? Because I know for a while that was viewed as the future, like having a small nuclear plant that could power fall, the whole country. Like, is that even something they're talking about anymore? Because it seems like everything now is electric.
Yeah, what we saw happen with nuclear was what I've seen happen. It's happening with AI at
Hmm.
least, and where you have, or the tech sector broadly, you have folks like Elizabeth Warren and even
I
Senator
love
Lindsey
her.
Graham have come out and said, "Well, we're going to have a specific new tech and AI regulatory body, right? Like a
Mm,
CFPB or whatever for just technology." And well, okay, we did that with nuclear power, right? We put in place a Nuclear Energy Regulatory Commission, and when you put that in place, they approved very few, if any, new nuclear projects. I mean, that was a place where investment and proposals to build new nuclear capacity largely went to die. And
mm,
that's what I don't want to see with any sort of new frontier technology.
Sure.
And so, again, I would actually encourage folks to look to on AI. Late last Congress, there was a bipartisan House of Representatives task force report on AI, and it's a couple hundred pages long actually, but it's incredible about how there was a bipartisan consensus built that says, look, we're going to regulate AI in a sectoral and incremental way. Instead of trying to create this brand new regulatory agency that just focuses on AI, it's a lot easier to teach a health regulator about AI than it is to teach a new agency about both AI and health.
Mm,
Addressing again specific incremental harms is really important, right? There are certain things that we know we can do. We very can very easily say, for example, um, creating a deep fake image of somebody in a non-consensual situation. That's a very narrow thing that we can say you're not going to do that.
right.
That doesn't smother the entire technology. Instead of trying to say, we're going to rewire the technology through regulation, that it's never going to be able to do that thing. You
Mm,
go after the specific bad actors and bad uses of that technology. And that's the approach that was adopted in that report. And I think that is going to solve a lot of the problems people are focused on. And in terms of the other big AI issue, which I think you were getting at, is displacement of folks.
mhm,
Um, I think there's plenty that we can be doing to at the K-12 level to make sure that people are better suited for the economy that exists today and the economy that will exist in the future. I mean, even today, we have schools that are producing kids to go and just rack up a bunch of debt and get a liberal arts
sure.
degree and then not actually find fulfilling career.
Correct. And then go work at a Starbucks afterwards. Right.
Right, right. So there is a lot, and that's an area where the government has a lot, almost all of the power. And
Mm,
so that's an area where we could be doing a lot better job of teaching resiliency, teaching diverse skill sets, and teaching folks to kind of understand market signals about where their highest and best
mm,
use is. And then there's certainly a room for uh, the ability to make sure that folks that do get displaced in narrow industries to retrain and advance themselves as technology changes. I don't think we do a very good job of that, and those are things that are certainly government costs and will require some regulation.
mm,
But the trade off there is that you do have greater innovation and dynamism, which we need.
mm. Yeah, that's and colleges suck, dude. Like we're getting to the point where like I'm not convinced I'm gonna tell my kid to go to college. Like we're getting close because I'm just like I don't. Outside of the social skills that you can gain and learning to live with roommates and learning to like those intangible skills, those are great, but those could be learned in other ways too. That I'm just kind of like I don't know. College is just the way that there needs to be a massive change to college for me to be a supporter of it because it's just insanely expensive. It's just for the anyone with a finance degree or anyone with a would be like the cost benefit is not there. It just doesn't exist unless it's like the certain like if you're going to be a doctor, you don't really have a choice. Like that's the route you have to go. But for a lot of professions, like I'm in sales for my real job, right? Own a media company. I didn't need college for that. Like that, I just need a mentor. That's so I don't know. You got me on a. Are you
Yeah,
are you on the and like where are you at on the college thing?
I don't want to tell people how to live their lives. I think that's an
Yeah, but you
important
can.
thing.
This is safe.
At the same time, I worry that there are things that we're doing as a society that is not allowing folks to see that there are a lot
Mm,
of different potential pathways to economics, prosperity, and success. You have government institutions and programs that are essentially incentivizing people to go down a couple sets of narrow pathways
right.
that all involve, hey, you got to go get a 4-year degree in X, Y, and Z. Well, why aren't people ready to be members of society at the end of K-12?
Right.
Are you an adult at 18 or are you not?
Yeah.
And that I think is something that, again, there's no silver bullet here. I'm not saying that all college education, I mean, is a waste of time at all. I mean, it's very degree specific. It's
Sure.
institution specific. But this idea that it's a 4-year degree is now a path to prosperity, I think that's really being challenged. And I'm worried that we have programs in place that aren't allowing the market signals to folks to understand that. If you
I
start,
I think that goes down all the way down to the K through 12 level though. Like I think they're already I mean, that's the whole point of getting rid of the Department of Education. That's the whole thought of like they're already, training the kids to through the K-12 only to have certain types of skill sets, only to have certain type of abilities to then that they have to go to college to sharpen those. Whereas I know, like, so my dad was a Christian school principal. I was blessed to go to a Christian school that the academics were top tier, like very, very, very tough to where when I went to college, I was very prepared. In fact, I was like, my first 2 years, I was like, like I got a very good high school degree, but I had a bunch of friends that went to public school that they were like, their 10th, 11th, 12th grade years, they just like, they didn't even have to, like, it was just a joke. Like, they didn't even have to do anything pretty much. They didn't even take attendance in one of our public schools close by. Like, it's just like, whatever. And I'm like, if the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade years were treated like almost a college, how much farther ahead would we be as a society? And then also teaching them way more practical skills like budgeting and finance and loans and debt and credit cards and those things where kids don't know their parents are in credit card debt. They just think that's the way they do. So then they go get their credit card and they go throw a bunch of clothes on it. And next thing you know, they have a 30% APR and they're screwed. Like that's how so many people's life starts here in America. This starts with debt. And then if it's not credit card debt, it's student loans. And
Yeah.
so to me, it just stems all the way down to the K through 12. Like it's a problem, not just in colleges. It's just the whole education system.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of gets at something that we're working on, which is there is all of this work out there and at the political and policy level to try and regulate technologies to prevent harms. But there's been very little done to try and teach people how to not get themselves in those bad situations to begin with. Right? We've understood that we're not going to stop people from driving. So what do you see in most schools? See driver's ed.
Right.
And what we need to increasingly see is how do you live in a world where the internet is in everything?
Yeah.
How do you keep yourself safe online? What's really encouraging is that we've seen a couple of states realize this and that this is a completely effective and not it doesn't have any constitutional problems associated with it. Teaching internet and online safety curriculums in schools. Florida and Virginia are starting to do this.
Cool.
I think that's a really great thing to do that nobody's arguing with. Nobody's suing to stop that. Yes, we should be teaching people how to spot a scam artist online, right? How to identify what's probably misinformation or purposeful disinformation.
Mm.
Those are very narrow things that we can do that would really pay a lot of dividends and also get people kind of used to the using technology in their everyday life instead of having to go back and say we're going to regulate this down to a level where we reduce all of the benefits we get from it as well.
I mean, even just child safety when it comes to posting videos and pictures. I mean, the amount of parents that just let their kids have a phone and just let them exist with their phone, and they could be in chat rooms, and their parents have no earthly clue. And the amount of time that the average individual is going to spend on technology is so much more than they're going to spend on their whatever job they get one day. And so you'd think that training on how to be safe with technology, because it's going to be an integral part of their life. It blows my mind, man, how many kids have phones. Like it's insane to me. I'm like, I saw like a 4-year-old walking down with an iPhone the other day. I'm like that's insane. Like, and that who knows what trouble that could get unless it's trained. So that's just a really interesting point. Instead of just being reactive, being proactive and teaching kids how to interact with technology. That's a very good point.
Yeah, well, speaking of technology, I apologize if you heard that. My
You're good.
smart home smoke detectors just went off. I think they were doing the monthly test,
Oh,
so I
nice.
apologize if that
You're
if
good.
anybody heard that. But see, all technology.
Technology's hey, it's good.
Yeah, it has its
It
benefits,
works.
but it has its trade-offs as well. So
Yeah,
sometimes
it's not a
you know,
problem at all.
interrupt you in the middle of a.
At
Uh,
least we know if you're gonna have a fire, you're gonna be alerted now. So they
that's
are
right. That's
working.
right.
That's a good thing.
But to your point, I think you're exactly right. That when you log off for the day from work, you're generally logging on to see what your friends are doing and texting people and saying, "Hey, where are you at?" And so yeah, technology is going to be part of our lives. The internet's going to be part of every part of your life, right? I mean, most people do their banking online now,
Yeah.
right? You go into
I
the
don't remember
bank,
the last time I saw a dollar bill. Like I just, you either
right?
pay with some sort of now you just pay with your phone. You have
Mhm.
Apple Wallet or Google Wallet or whatever. Like
Yeah,
it's crazy.
and I worry that there has been big push out there to try and say we're going to make phones, tablets, the internet itself perfectly safe through policy. You can help, but it's never going to be 100%. And
Mm,
I worry that without the component of education, whether that is the students themselves or it is the parents, right? There, you can do plenty of public service education at the adult level as well. You're never going, nothing is going to be more effective at protecting a kid online than a parent controlling access to the device.
yeah, well, policy doesn't fix user error.
100%.
Right.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. So it's preventing that user error and also not giving the user a false sense of security by saying, "Hey, we passed the Internet is Safe for Everybody Act, so now you're
Mm,
safe." That's never going to happen. So it's about empowering users, and you can do that without, again, creating a lot of the constitutional issues, the censorship issues that we talked about earlier.
sure. Well, let's do this as we because I could feel like we could. I love this kind of conversation. This is fun and it's enjoyable to kind of like learn more because I don't know much about the policy space of tech, and so it's been really intriguing to me. Would you mind telling our listeners about NetChoice? What is NetChoice? And then I know you're the director of policy at NetChoice. So what is NetChoice? And then is there anywhere that people can support you guys, follow you if people want to hear more and they're interested? Can they go?
Yeah, absolutely. So NetChoice, we are a trade association, so we do represent several major and mid and small technology companies. But that said, we are a principles-based trade association. So what drives the policy work that we do is that we believe in an internet built for free expression and free enterprise. Sometimes that puts us at odds with some of the specific things that some of our members would like to see, but we are again focused on our principles, and ultimately we believe that will be the greatest benefit for the country and for our members going forward is again that
Mm,
internet built on free enterprise and free expression. So you can see what we're working on at netchoice.org. That is our website. We're working on lots of different ways to again try and protect free speech online and also prevent regulations that would stifle innovation and competition going forward.
that's awesome. Um, Well, man, I appreciate it. This was really fun. I appreciate you coming on and chatting. And I know I'm sometimes all over the place on what we talked about. It's probably more of your more random
It was fantastic.
conversation.
I,
But
I appreciated the opportunity to talk about some other things than what I have to talk about every single day. So I really appreciate
well,
it.
hopefully I didn't get too many Saudi Arabia princes mad at you today. So that's hopefully that's not going to happen from our Saudi from our Saudi
I
conversation.
wasn't planning on visiting the line anytime soon. So, yeah, I think, yeah, it's still the pictures I've seen. It's very much so just a ditch in the desert. So
Yeah, yeah.
you know, for
So
a while.
I'll text you after. I'll get your number. I'll send you the YouTube video. This guy went there and like literally just stayed in the desert with the local Bedouins, and but the amount of trucks, like they are working 24/7, no break. Like they're making mountains because the amount of sand that they're taking away from this little like strip, they're building mountains with the amount of sand they're moving. So like it's not like they're not joking about this. And that's what's crazy because they are
Yeah.
putting I think it was like the original thing was like 500 billion was the original quote and now it's up to like, 2 trillion or something like that and it's like, well first of all, that's FU money. That's what they have. That's just, that's another level of wealth. If they were saying it's fine, go ahead. But yeah, anyway, I'll send you the documentary was insane though. It was very well done. So
Yeah, I think I've seen like a snippet of that video. It is crazy looking. Again, I'm excited when people want to build big cool things, but I worry when government's at the center of that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially when it's a dictatorship at the center of that, it makes
Exactly.
me like a little concerned. Like, well, here let's. I was like, we can just keep trailing off into that conversation. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, guys. Please support Patrick. Support NetChoice. They're doing a lot of good work. And if you have any other questions, I can always have Patrick back on the show and I can ask your questions to him as well. Well, thank you, brother. We'll keep talking about this because I'll tell you one more thing off camera in a second. But thank you, brother, for coming on. This was really, really fun and I appreciate it a lot.
No, this is great. I really appreciate it.
Perfect, man. All right, we'll see ya. Thanks, everyone. Please subscribe to the channel, follow, and see you guys on the next episode.